Hello, my name's Rhiannon, and I thought coming home after a 16-hour hospital shift would mean rest, maybe even just a quiet meal. Instead, I found my bags on the porch. My key didn't fit, and my father, the man who once held my hand at my mother's funeral, looked me in the eye and said, "You don't live here anymore." No warning, no explanation, just a lock changed, and a door that wouldn't open. But that wasn't the worst part. Because what they took from me wasn't just a house. They rewrote our family history, without me in it. And now I'm wondering, how long had they been planning it? And why did it take me this long to see it coming? I wasn't asking for comfort. I was asking for a door that opens. It had been 16 straight hours. I could still feel the ache in my knuckles from holding the same pen all day. My ID badge hung from a fraying lanyard around my neck, half soaked by the misty drizzle that had started as I pulled off the freeway. Every breath I took inside the car fogged the windshield, but I didn't bother wiping it. I was already home. My body knew the turns by muscle memory, and my heart had already begun to exhale. It was Wednesday night, late. The kind of quiet where even the neighborhood dogs had settled down, and the only sound was the low thrum of streetlights buzzing through the rain. I parked the car in the same spot I'd always used, right next to the cracked curb under the old elm tree. The tires hissed against wet pavement. My hands moved slowly, heavy. I killed the engine, unclipped my badge, and reached for the door. I wasn't thinking about anything, not patience, not the charting I hadn't finished, not even the lasagna I'd left in the staff fridge. I was just ready to step inside, but the key didn't turn. At first, I thought I was holding it wrong. My fingers were stiff. I flipped it, tried again. Still stuck. I jiggled it. It scraped, resisted, stopped cold. I leaned closer, squinting through the rain at the deadbolt. Nothing looked off, but I could feel it. Like when you hug someone who hugs back too late. Something was wrong. The porch light clicked on. My father stood in the doorway. He wasn't startled, wasn't tired, just blank, like he'd known I'd show up and had already played out this moment in his head. Leland never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His silence was a language of its own. "You shouldn't be here," he said. I blinked, like maybe he hadn't really spoken. But he just stood there, hands at his sides, expression neutral. No trace of concern, not even curiosity. "My key's not working," I said, my voice hoarse from the shift. "We changed the locks." We, not I, not the landlord. We. I looked down. My duffel bag sat beside the steps, already wet, the nylon soaking through. My backup scrubs were in there, the stethoscope my mother gave me for nursing school. The blanket I always kept in my car for overnight shifts. "I just got off work," I said, stupidly, like that explained everything. He didn't reply. Instead, he stepped back and gently pushed the door closed. Click. That was the sound that cut deepest. Click. Not a slam, not a bang, just a soft mechanical sound, deliberate and final. I stood there for a second too long, just long enough to hear the neighbor's door creak open across the street. Mrs. Lee, in her bathrobe, peered out with a flashlight. She squinted into the rain. "Rhiannon?" she called. "Everything okay, honey?" Before I could answer, my father's voice rang out through the still air, low but unmistakably sharp. "She doesn't live here anymore. She made her choice." That did it. The shame that bloomed in my chest wasn't loud. It was slow, cold, a rising tide that drowned whatever self-respect I had left. I bent down, picked up my bag, and walked slowly back to my car. Not because I didn't want to run, but because I didn't want to fall. He didn't even wait to see if I left. Once inside the car, I turned the key, then stopped. My hands sat on the wheel. I stared straight ahead, breathing through my teeth. My phone was silent. No missed calls, no new messages. He'd said I made my choice. But what choice was that? Choosing to help with bills when he had surgery. Choosing to stay home with him when his second wife left for 3 days without telling anyone. Choosing to move back after Mom died because I thought maybe, just maybe, he didn't want to be alone. Apparently, The only choice I'd made was overstaying my usefulness. The drizzle became a proper rain, tapping softly against the windshield. I didn't cry. Not even when I saw Mrs. Lee still standing at her door, watching me with that look. Pity. Not even when I shifted into reverse and backed out of the driveway I used to bike down every day after school. I didn't cry because I knew if I did, it wouldn't stop. Instead, I drove. Not to Oran's, not to a hotel. I didn't even know where I was going. I just drove, letting the miles pile up like insulation. Half an hour later, I found a gas station with a broken air pump and a flickering light over the ice machine. I pulled in, turned off the car, and sat. He didn't even ask me why. He didn't say, "Come inside." He didn't even say goodbye. He looked at me like I was a stranger, like I hadn't stood in that kitchen with a sponge in my hand and his name on every bill taped to the fridge, like I hadn't changed my work shifts to drive him to appointments when he couldn't walk without holding onto furniture, like I wasn't his daughter. I wasn't angry, not yet. That would come later. Right now I was tired, bone tired, not from the job, but from the way silence becomes a weapon when it's wielded by someone who's supposed to protect you. I glanced at my reflection in the side window. Raindrops blurred it. Good. I didn't want to see myself right then. I didn't want to see the woman who still thought maybe he'd come to the car and knock on the window, that he'd say it was a misunderstanding. But the porch light was already off, so I sat there. In a parked car, outside a nameless gas station on a street I didn't recognize, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from floating away. I didn't lose a home tonight. I lost a father I thought I still had. He used to say I was his peace. Now I'm just another burden he shut the door on. The lot behind the gas station was nearly empty, except for a white van parked at the edge, engine running, with someone inside staring at their phone. I stayed in my car, hands idle on the steering wheel, letting the heater run long enough to keep my fingers from going numb. I didn't have a destination. I wasn't sure I needed one yet. I'd parked behind the building deliberately, out of sight of the pumps. I wasn't ready to be witnessed again. Not by strangers, not by anyone, that line my father said. She doesn't live here anymore. He said it like we were discussing a change in utilities, like my existence was an outdated account he'd finally closed. But it wasn't sudden. Not really. It had been building. Quietly, strategically. I just hadn't wanted to see it. My mind drifted back to a moment exactly 1 week ago. We'd sat at the kitchen table, the one with a nick on the corner I gave it when I was 12, flipping a pancake too high. Dad had brewed coffee that morning, even though he rarely did. No Verena, just him and me. "You've been working non-stop," he'd said, almost tender. "Why don't you take a few days and visit Angela in Monterey? You've earned a little rest." I remember hesitating. I had work. I had a couple patients I'd been following for weeks. But then he gave me that look. Soft eyes, folded hands, like the man who used to read to me during storms. It wasn't warmth I felt. It was strategy dressed in memory. I said I'd think about it. He told me, "I'll cover the house bills while you're gone. Just go." Rest. I left the next day with a small bag, just a change of clothes, assuming I'd be back before the weekend ended. But the locks had already been changed by the time I hit the halfway point on Highway 101. I just didn't know it yet. That wasn't kindness. It was a setup. It wasn't about space or rest. It was about absence. Mine. An absence they needed to make room for a new narrative, one where I no longer belonged. I glanced at my phone, half hoping for a message from him. Nothing. But a new one did appear. From my cousin, Ryan. "Your dad says you cursed him out last year. Said you called him useless and threatened to cut ties. He says that's why you're out." I stared at the screen, trying to recall the message. I searched through my old texts, found it. Dated 11 months ago. It read, "I'm not sure how much longer I can keep covering the mortgage and groceries if I'm also trying to pay off my loans. I need help. This can't keep falling on me." That was it. No insults, no profanity, just exhaustion. The kind that's lived in your spine for so long, you forget what lightness feels like. But now, that message had a new role. It was being weaponized. That's when I understood. It wasn't about logic. It wasn't even about truth. It was about crafting a story that let him sleep at night, One where he was the wounded father and I was the combative daughter who never appreciated him. He'd always loved saying, "You think the world owes you something." I used to think he said it to keep me grounded. Now I knew it was projection. I closed my eyes, let the silence crawl back into the car. A storm wasn't coming. It was already here. It had been for years. I just kept pretending it was weathering instead of erosion. There was one number I'd never deleted from my phone. One person I told myself I'd only call when things got really bad. I guess being locked out of your own home, your memories repurposed, and your reputation rewritten. That qualified. I tapped Oren's name. It rang once, twice, then his voice. Steady, low. "I've been expecting this call." I didn't speak right away. I hadn't expected that response. I stared at the blinking cursor of silence between us, then said the only thing I had left. "He shut the door, Oren. For good." Oren didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. "Then maybe it's time you open another." That night, I didn't sleep at the gas station. I drove, not with urgency, but with clarity. I knew I wasn't going back. Not tonight, not next week, not to beg. I was done believing I could earn my way back into that house with patience, or respect, or money. It was never about what I gave. It was about control. The streetlights became fewer as I left the city center. I pulled into the lot of a 24-hour diner, went inside, ordered the cheapest bowl of soup on the menu, and borrowed a napkin to scribble on, not to make a plan, just to write something that was mine. I wrote 3 words. He chose silence. I underlined it, then wrote another sentence. I choose something else. By the time I'd finished the soup, I knew exactly where I was going. And it wasn't back. I'm done hoping he'll choose me. I'm choosing myself this time. I thought cutting ties would feel like grief, but it felt more like exhaling. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was the silence, not the uncomfortable kind that hangs around empty rooms, but a silence that breathes with you. Still, steady, generous. I was wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books. The sun hadn't fully risen, but pale light filtered through the dusty blinds in Oren's apartment, casting soft shadows across the faded couch I'd collapsed onto a few hours earlier. I sat up slowly, blinking against the dull ache behind my eyes. My phone was face down on the coffee table, right where I left it after Oren had talked me off the edge last night. I hadn't cried. Still hadn't. But the tears were like seeds under ice, waiting. From the kitchen, I heard the soft clink of mugs. Oren was already up, boiling water like he always did instead of using the kettle. He didn't look up as I entered. "There's coffee," he said simply. I nodded, stepped in, poured myself half a cup. I didn't want to owe the day more than I had to. He finally glanced over. "Did you sleep at all?" "Enough to remember who I am." That made him smile, just a little. He placed a manila folder on the table between us and slid it toward me. "You're going to want to see this." I raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask. I opened the folder. Inside was a screenshot, a forwarded email chain, and at the bottom, a typed line that felt like a slap in the face. "Unanimous agreement. Rhiannon no longer has rights to the residence." My breath caught. The email wasn't from a landlord. It wasn't from a court. It was a family thread. Leland, Verena, even my half-brother Caleb. They'd held a family discussion, without me. They'd taken a vote, like I was a line item on a budget, and they'd decided I no longer belonged. "You're kidding me," I whispered. Oren just shook his head. "That came in late last night from someone who still has access to the thread. I redacted the source, for their sake." I stared at the printout. They'd made a spreadsheet, color-coded. Assignments, notes, proposed new furniture placements. My name was in red. Next to it, storage or disposal recommended. "They took a vote," I said again, slower this time. "They took a vote on my worth." There was nothing else to say. I closed the folder, stood up, and grabbed my keys from the counter. Oren didn't ask where I was going. He just nodded, the way people do when they know you're not coming back the same. By the time I pulled into the old neighborhood, the sun had cleared the roofs and turned everything bright, falsely cheerful. It was quiet except for a lawnmower a few doors down. I parked on the curb across the street. Not in the driveway. That space didn't feel like mine anymore. The garage door was cracked open. I could see Verena's yoga mat rolled up against the wall. A pile of boxes with printed labels sat beside it. Craft supplies, seasonal decor, Zinnia's stuff. I scanned the front of the house. New potted plants, curtains drawn. Nothing broken, nothing obvious. Just unfamiliar. I walked along the side of the house slowly, sticking close to the fence line. My old bedroom window had new curtains, baby blue, fluttering slightly from a cracked pane. It used to have yellow floral ones. Mom picked them with me when I was 9. I tiptoed across the grass, still damp from the morning, and crouched behind the hedge. I leaned just enough to peer through a sliver in the blinds. My room was gone. The bookshelves I built were empty. The paint was different. A dull, trendy gray. The corkboard that once held photos of my graduation, my late shifts, my mom and me, gone. In its place was a white, lacquered desk with pink post-it notes and glitter pens. The closet door was open. I saw a full-length mirror with LED strips along the frame. On the wall, in fancy script letters, was a mounted sign, Zinnia's Creative Space. My chest tightened, but I didn't blink. Not yet. I stepped back, walked around toward the side trash bin. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe a sign that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined living here. Loving here. I found it in the bin. My photo frame, the one that used to sit on Mom's nightstand. A picture of her brushing my hair on the front porch. The glass was cracked, the frame bent. The picture was still inside, but it had been flipped backward, face down. I didn't pick it up. I just stood there, hand gripping the top of the fence, heart doing something strange. Not breaking exactly, but solidifying, like stone drying under sunlight. I didn't knock on the door, didn't scream, didn't throw the frame through the window. I didn't need to. They'd already told me everything I needed to know. I whispered, "You're not erasing me. You're proving me right." Then I pulled out my phone, took one photo of the bedroom door with the plaque on it. Not because I wanted to remember, because I needed evidence. I slid the phone back into my pocket, walked back toward my car slowly, passing the roses I once planted with Mom in the front bed. They were all dead now. Pulled out, replaced with white gravel and faux succulents. Fine. They've replaced me. That means I'm free to start replacing them. If they think I'm walking away, they clearly forgot who built the floor they're standing on. The folder sat unopened on Oren's kitchen table for almost 2 hours before I had the courage to touch it. It was one of those plain manila ones. No stickers, no labels, just the quiet weight of a dozen years' worth of financial paper cuts. He had found it while helping me gather proof of everything I'd paid into the house, grocery lists, scribbled on old receipts, transfer records from my checking account to my father's, digital notes I'd forgotten I even wrote. All dated, all logged. But this folder was different. This one, I'd left behind in a drawer when I moved out the first time after Mom died. Back then, I was too emotionally scattered to realize I had left behind evidence of a life I'd built around a man who never meant to keep me in it. I finally opened it, coffee cooling beside me. My thumb brushed over a line item I recognized, $3,500. That was the emergency fund I'd sent Dad last fall. I remembered the transfer clearly. I had just finished working a double at the clinic, my rent was due in 4 days, and I still sent the money without hesitation. I told him, "Just hold on to it for now. I might need it soon." He said, "Of course, baby. You know I've got you." Apparently, he didn't. Because 2 days after I'd sent that money, it went straight into Verena's account. Not for bills, not for the house. I scrolled through the attached Venmo screenshot Oren had printed. Verena's note said it all. Disneyland magic for Zinnia. Zinnia, her daughter, not mine, not even a child anymore. A 24-year-old content creator who hadn't worked a job longer than 6 months and who still thought posting TikToks with voiceovers was a career path. My money, the money I'd earned giving flu shots in parking lots and comforting patients who couldn't afford copays, went to a vacation I wasn't even told about. I wasn't furious. Not right away. That would come later. What I felt in that moment was smaller, quieter. A betrayal so casual it didn't even register as wrong to them. It was just expected. Because of course, Rhiannon would pay. Of course, she wouldn't mind. She's the reliable one. But I did mind, and I wasn't going to be quiet about it anymore. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to my father. Do you even remember the roof I patched with my own money? No reply, but I saw the read receipt. Seen at 10:42 a.m. Silence. His favorite way to win an argument. By never starting one. I stared at the phone for a few seconds longer, waiting for something. Anything. An excuse. A denial. A gaslighting deflection. Instead, there was nothing. Just that small, familiar bubble of non-response, the same one I'd been handed my whole life whenever I asked for clarity. I didn't toss the phone. I placed it face down, got up, and walked to the window. The Sacramento sun was coming in strong now, sharp through the blinds, warming the side of my face as if daring me to melt. But I didn't. I stiffened. I walked back to the table, pulled out the rest of the folder. That's when I found the handwritten list I'd made 2 years ago, my repairs list. It was laughable now. I had scribbled it on an old Safeway envelope. Fix leaking kitchen sink, replace bathroom faucet, cover electric for May-June, pay off overdue gas bill, buy new fridge light bulb. I remembered checking those things off one by one. I remembered crawling under the sink on a Sunday afternoon, watching YouTube tutorials on how to replace a pipe trap while Dad sat in the next room watching TV and pretending he didn't hear the tools fall. I remembered handing him my debit card when the power nearly got shut off. I remembered doing his tax prep when he forgot for 3 years. And then I remembered that now, in the house I helped sustain, my name was scrubbed off everything, including my room. I stood very still. Then I grabbed my phone and called Verena. No greeting, no warm-up. You spent my money. She paused. I could hear movement in the background, maybe a blender or a hairdryer. Excuse me? She finally said, all sugar. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The $3,500 I sent Dad for emergencies. You funneled it into a Disneyland trip for your daughter. Her voice dropped a note in pitch, the fake innocence melting into passive aggression. We thought you wouldn't mind. You weren't using it. Besides, it was for family. Is that what I am now? Not family? There was a pause. Not even a breath. You know, Rhiannon, she began, using that slow, condescending tone like she was trying to talk sense into someone emotionally unstable. Sometimes you act like everything in this house revolves around you. Maybe it's time you understood you're not the only one who gave something up. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. You touch anything else of mine, I said calmly, and I won't just come back. I'll come back with paperwork. And I hung up. No dramatic exit, no screaming. Just a clean severing of the rope she'd been tightening around my throat for the last 6 years. I walked straight to the hallway, opened my laptop, and searched. Real estate attorney, plus quiet title, plus Sacramento. 5 results popped up. I clicked the one with the highest rating and shortest name. Something about short names made me trust lawyers more. No fluff, no nonsense. I drafted the email carefully. Subject line, quiet title, claim inquiry. Body, hello, I'm inquiring about filing a quiet title action on a property I partially financed, maintained, and lived in for over a decade, which was recently taken over by family without legal eviction. I have proof of contributions, witness statements, and digital evidence. Please advise on next steps. Regards, Rhiannon. Elira Cross. I didn't hesitate before clicking Send. That night, I created a folder on my desktop. I named it Project Elira for Mom. Because this wasn't just about reclaiming a house anymore. It was about reclaiming her memory. The smell of cinnamon in her kitchen, the way she used to hum while folding laundry, the blankets she tucked around my legs on cold nights. They could take my room. They could repaint the walls. They could even throw my face-down photo in the trash, but they would not erase her. And they sure as hell weren't going to erase me. They think they erased me. What they really did was release me. I spent the next morning doing what I'd always done best. Sorting, scanning, piecing things together. Except this time, it wasn't for a hospital intake file or a patient case review. It was for me, for the version of myself I'd ignored too long. And that version? She was done playing fair. Oren sat across from me at the kitchen table, his sleeves rolled up, a legal pad in front of him, scribbled with timelines and names. We worked without small talk, the kind of silence that isn't awkward, but efficient. We'd spent most of the morning going over payment logs, utility receipts, my bank statements, anything that showed my consistent, quiet investment in a house I no longer had access to. But the folder I couldn't find was the one that mattered most, the one with my mom's handwriting. "Do you still have the letter from your mom?" Oren asked, voice low, cautious. I froze. That letter. The one she'd written when she knew the chemo wasn't working, the one she told me to open when it all gets too loud. I'd left it in the attic, tucked into the lid of an old shoebox. I hadn't wanted it near me during the years I bounced between leases and long shifts. That letter was sacred, a compass, too fragile to carry around in the chaos. I stood up, grabbing my phone, called my father, straight to voicemail. Next, I messaged Zinnia. It showed delivered. Never read. A knot formed at the base of my neck. 10 minutes later, Oren's phone buzzed. A text from a neighbor he'd reached out to weeks ago when this mess started. Someone who still lived on the street, someone who liked to garden and listen more than she spoke. "Thought you should see this," the text read. Attached was a blurry screenshot from a Ring camera across the yard. In it, Verena stood near a trash bin holding a torn envelope. On it, unmistakably, were the words in my mother's handwriting. "To Rhiannon, love, Mom." Verena was mid-sentence in the still. But below the photo, the neighbor had written out what she said, captured clearly from the audio. "She's clinging to ghosts. This house needs cleansing." I nearly dropped the phone. I didn't speak. Oren didn't ask. We both knew. That letter, that one irreplaceable letter, had been destroyed, on purpose, not lost, not misplaced, eliminated. My mother's final words were torn up and tossed out like a junk flyer. I walked to the sink, ran the tap, cupped the cold water in my palms, and pressed it to my face, not to cry, but to stay grounded, to keep from shattering into something I couldn't sweep back up. And yet, as painful as it was, it made everything clearer. This wasn't about a house. This wasn't even about money. It was about control. And their desperate need to rewrite the story with me erased from the script. I dried my hands, went back to the table, and picked up my phone again. This time, I called my brother. Caleb picked up after the second ring. "Why are you stirring things again?" he asked, voice heavy with annoyance. "I'm not stirring anything. I just want to ask you one thing." A long pause. "What?" "You knew about the letter. You saw her write it. You knew what it meant to me." He sighed, that lazy, performative sigh he always gave when responsibility came knocking. "You always make things so dramatic. Dad's tired. Verena's doing her best." I closed my eyes. "And me? What about me? Am I not family anymore?" He didn't answer. "Caleb," I pressed. "Say something." Click. He hung up. I stared at the blank screen, not shocked, just confirmed. Every bridge they burned, they lit with my matches, handed to them over years of silence and compromise. That night, I drove back to the house, not to break in, not to start a scene. I just stood in the backyard, staring up at the window that used to be mine. The curtains were different now, floral, artificial, something pre-made, no doubt ordered online, and praised for being minimalist, but cozy. Nothing like the mismatched yellow panels my mom sewed herself when I was in middle school. Those had heart, these had hashtags. I whispered up at the window, soft but steady. "You broke the last piece of her. Now watch me rebuild everything in my name." The next morning, I met Oren at his office. He brought out a binder. Inside, every proof of my financial contributions, bank transfers, utility logs, Amazon orders for tools and paint, screenshots of messages from Dad asking for help, all dated, all archived. I looked through them one by one. I didn't need revenge. I needed recognition. "They've turned this house into a brand," I muttered. A story where they're the survivors, but they're not. They're just loud. Are you ready for how messy this could get? Oren asked, tapping the binder. It's already messy, I said, holding his gaze. I'm just putting it in order. He nodded once, slid a legal envelope toward me. I signed. Over the next hour, we drafted a property claim, quiet title action, legal service notice. Every word was backed by proof, every line typed with intention. I wasn't bluffing anymore. When we finished, I opened my laptop and renamed the digital folder that held everything. Elira Estate, Legal Redemption Plan. Because they hadn't erased me, they'd underestimated me. And that mistake was going to cost them everything they thought they owned. I didn't start this fight, but I'll end it with paperwork and peace. The hum of the fluorescent lights in Oren's office blended with the soft tapping of my fingertips against the thick manila envelope sitting between us. There was nothing inside it we hadn't already seen. Still, we both stared like it might reveal something new if we waited long enough. The folder was labeled with Sharpie. Evidence. Financial plus legal. And then my phone buzzed. I turned it over without thinking. The screen was filled with a message from my cousin, a screenshot. Is everything okay? Your dad's making it sound serious. Below her text was a Facebook post from Leland. He wrote, Some children forget the hands that fed them. Mental illness is a sad thing, especially when it turns into entitlement masked as victimhood. We pray for her. My throat tightened, not because it was shocking, but because it wasn't. This was exactly the sort of thing he would do, quiet cruelty dressed up in soft concern. The post was designed to invite sympathy, for him, to paint me as unstable, selfish, some fragile mess unraveling because I didn't get my way. The comments were worse. So heartbreaking. You're a good dad, Lee. Keep praying. Entitlement is destroying this generation. I always knew she was trouble, never smiled in photos. And there it was, the court of public opinion, already in session. I felt exposed, not for who I was, but for how he had chosen to frame me. I wasn't a person, I was a warning. I stood, walked over to Oren's printer, hit print on my phone, and watched the post come to life in paper form. When it finished, I folded it in thirds and slid it into the front sleeve of my binder. This goes under character defamation, I said, voice low. Right next to the payment logs. You okay? Oren asked carefully. I'm not mad, I said. I'm motivated. That night, as I sat alone in my room at Oren's, the guest room his aunt used to stay in, now filled with extra blankets and stacked paper files, something clicked. A memory I hadn't reached for in years. It was from the last winter Mom was alive. We'd spent a Saturday afternoon cleaning out the attic. She was trying to declutter, she said, but I knew she just wanted to control what happened to her things. We found a small fireproof safe tucked under the far wall. She laughed when she opened it, not because of what was inside, but because she'd almost forgotten she owned it. Inside were 3 things: her original will, the deed to the house, and a sealed envelope labeled, For Rhiannon, when they forget. She hadn't handed it to me then. She'd tucked it back inside, said it wasn't time. I never thought to look for it again. Until now. The next morning, I called Mrs. Lee. She answered on the first ring. I've been waiting for your call, she said. They're all out of the house today. You've got a 2-hour window. I didn't ask how she knew. Mrs. Lee always knew. I drove straight there, parked 2 houses down, and slipped through the side gate with the key she'd given me. The back door was still the same, creaky hinge, old screen, but I didn't go inside. I went up. The attic hadn't changed. Same musty air, same uneven boards. I moved slowly, avoiding the spot near the chimney that always threatened to cave. When I reached the crawlspace wall, I felt along the edge for the false panel. It came off easier than I expected. There it was, the safe. Combination lock. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and tried the numbers I remembered. My birthday, Mom's, and the day we planted the lemon tree out back. Click. The lid opened. The envelope was still there, yellowed but intact. So was the deed, notarized with my name. Transferred from Leland to me at the age of 21. Executed quietly, never registered publicly, but legal. My breath caught in my throat. I held the papers like they were sacred. because to me they were. I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. When I returned to Oren's, I walked in without saying a word and placed the deed on the table. He looked at it, then at me, then back at the document. "Are you serious?" he asked, stunned. I nodded. She made sure I'd be protected. He just never thought I'd find it. Oren ran a hand through his hair. "They're going to lose everything." "Good," I said. "They don't deserve it." That afternoon, we filed the preliminary documents for property ownership. The email I sent included screenshots of the deed, the signed transfer, my mom's note, bank records, and, just for good measure, the Facebook post. Subject line: Formal service, property claim, Elira Estate. Less than an hour later, Verena replied, "You wouldn't dare." I stared at the blinking cursor for a moment before typing back. "Already did." I didn't smile. This wasn't about satisfaction. It was about setting a boundary that should have been honored years ago. When I shut my laptop, the room felt different. Not brighter, but cleaner. Like something toxic had finally left the air. I didn't start this fight, but I was damn sure going to finish it. With paperwork and peace. If they want war, they better pack light. The email was still open on my screen, its subject line burning like a silent dare. House transfer, final negotiation. Except this wasn't a negotiation. This was the part where I stopped asking nicely. I didn't reply, not yet. First, I needed to finish what I'd started. The next morning, I arrived at Oren's office before he did. The cleaning crew hadn't come in yet, so the whole place smelled faintly of last night's coffee and printer toner. I didn't mind. The familiarity steadied me. At 9:05 a.m. sharp, a knock came at the door. Oren was just walking in, cup in hand, when the courier handed over the envelope. Thick. Sealed. Official. It was the response from Leland's attorney. I took it without a word, opened it slowly, and read every line. They weren't contesting the deed. At least not directly. They were arguing emotional duress, lack of understanding of the consequences, and no formal registration. Classic smoke and mirrors. "They're hoping to bury this under paperwork," Oren said, scanning the same lines I had. "Delay tactic." "Well," I replied, "let's not let them." After we finalized the next steps, I went through my own files again, not just for the legal process. For me, I found something I hadn't noticed before, an email thread between Verena and my father that had been accidentally forwarded to me years ago. I'd archived it, assuming it was a mistake. Now I opened it. Subject line: Timeline for clean transition. Verena had written, "Once she's out, we can get a better rate. Zinnia deserves more space, and refinancing while rates are still low would be smart. You said Rhiannon was considering moving anyway. Let's finalize before she backtracks." And Leland's reply? "Agreed. Let me know the soonest we can make it stick." I didn't breathe for a moment, not out of shock, but out of something heavier. Confirmation. I wasn't just pushed out. I was an obstacle in a financial plan. They weren't grieving me. They were replacing me with a better interest rate. I printed the thread and placed it on top of the binder marked Motivation. It was almost noon when the next blow landed. My phone pinged. A message from Lisa J., a childhood friend I hadn't spoken to in months. We'd grown up on the same street, had sleepovers under glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, even got matching bracelets from the county fair. Her message was short. "Your dad posted again. Are you really suing him?" I blinked, then sighed. Another post. Of course, I opened Facebook. I hadn't logged in for days, not since the last incident. There it was, Leland's latest masterpiece. Forgiveness is hard when you've been attacked by someone you raised. But we continue to pray for her healing. Some wounds are self-inflicted. The comments poured in like a familiar poison. She should be grateful she had a roof at all. "You tried your best, Lee." It's always the quiet ones who turn on you. I didn't even feel anger this time. It was like watching strangers talk about a character I didn't recognize. Only, they were talking about me, and it still cut. I sent Lisa screenshots of the deed, the signed transfer, the payments, the emails. I typed, "This isn't about revenge, it's about truth. I'm not the villain in their bedtime story. No reply. 3 hours later, I saw her name in the comments. It's sad what entitlement can do to a good family. That one stung more than I'd like to admit. But pain is a funny thing. It either breaks you or it builds something in you that wasn't there before. I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it, Receipts, Not for War, for Peace. Oren came into the room with a stack of exhibits for filing. You sure you want to push this far? He asked. They started it, I said, but I'll be the one to finish it clean. He watched me for a second, then nodded. Once this hits court, they might dig everything. Be ready for backlash. I've already been burned, I said, slipping Lisa's comment into the folder. Now I'm fireproof. Later that evening, I cleared the dining table and spread everything out. The deed, the payment logs, screenshots, the letter from Mom, the photos, even the one of Verena holding the ripped envelope with my name. And then, on top of everything, I taped a single photo. Elira, holding me on the front porch, her face soft with love, sunlight in her hair. We looked happy. And we were, once. She never fought for herself, I whispered. I will. Oren returned with takeout and found me sitting in silence, staring at that photo like it could speak. You okay? He asked. Getting there. We ate quietly. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. The legal deadline for them to vacate was now 72 hours away. I didn't sleep that night. I reviewed the documents again, practiced responses in the mirror, thought about every lie told about me, every door shut in my face, every birthday forgotten because it wasn't convenient. Around 3:17 a.m., my inbox dinged. New email. Subject, house transfer, final negotiation. The sender, Verena. Not the attorney, not Leland. I clicked it open. We'd like to discuss an amicable solution before this escalates further. Amicable. Now they wanted peace. I closed the laptop slowly. If they want war, they better pack light. They didn't just lose a house, they lost the right to rewrite my story. 3 days had passed, slow and sharp like a dull knife. Every hour carried the weight of years they thought I would forget. But the waiting was over. This morning wasn't about memories or regrets. It was about the truth, printed, signed, sealed, and ready. I got dressed with purpose, not armor, no red, no black. A cream blouse, navy slacks, clean lines, simple. I tied my hair back, no lipstick, no dramatics. Oren picked me up at 8:00 a.m. Sharp. Neither of us said much during the drive. The silence between us wasn't tense. It was steady, like the inhale before a solid step forward. By 9:30, we were parked 2 blocks from the house. We waited for the court officer to arrive. I didn't want to walk in there before the law did. Not because I was afraid, but because I'd spent enough years being told I was emotional, too intense, making things bigger than they were. Today, I'd let the system speak for me. At 9:58, I stepped out of the car. My heels made small, confident clicks on the sidewalk as I approached the house, the same house I grew up in, the house where I learned to braid my hair in the hallway mirror, where I ate cereal with Mom on Sunday mornings and watched her fold towels just the way she liked them, always in thirds. I knocked once. The door opened slowly. Verena stood there, wearing a robe, hair tied in a towel, as if I'd disturbed her spa morning rather than arrived with a legal blow. She didn't say hello. I didn't say anything either. I handed her the thick envelope, legal notice, final ruling, eviction order, transfer confirmation, all of it. She blinked fast. You think this will hold up? I met her eyes. It already has. The silence stretched. Behind her, I heard the soft shuffle of Leland's footsteps. He came into view, shirt unbuttoned, glasses hanging from his collar. So this is how you treat your father, he said. I didn't flinch. You stopped being my father the moment you changed the locks. For a split second, something flickered across his face. Maybe regret, maybe just annoyance. But it passed. I turned and stepped off the porch. 2 minutes later, a car pulled up. Official plates. Court officer stepped out, briefcase in hand. He walked straight to the door, knocked twice, identified himself, then posted the notice on the frame. 24-hour vacate order. Enforced. Verena shouted something, a mix of rage and confusion. But the officer remained calm, nodding politely, pointing to the papers. You can read it. You've been served properly. You have until 10 a.m. tomorrow. Zinnia appeared next. Still in pajama pants and a sports bra, phone in hand. She was live streaming the entire thing. Her voice was loud, dramatic. She's evicting her own family, you guys. We're being kicked out by my sister. I didn't bother correcting her. We weren't sisters. We never were. I was the one who paid for her oat milk and internet bills when she decided she wanted to build her brand. And now, her audience was watching her version of heartbreak, carefully framed, filtered, and hashtagged. I stood still, watching from the sidewalk. This wasn't my mess to untangle anymore. This was their unraveling. Slowly, neighbors began to step out. One by one. No one said a word. A few glanced my way, nodded. Some simply watched. Mrs. Lee came out last. She wore her usual gardening apron, mug in hand. She didn't speak, just lifted the cup slightly in quiet acknowledgement. I returned the gesture. Leland looked around, eyes scanning the street like it betrayed him. No one came to his defense. And just like that, the house didn't belong to them anymore. Not legally, not emotionally, not symbolically. I turned and walked back to the car. Once inside, I let out a long, slow breath. My hands were steady. My chest no longer felt like it was trying to hold back a scream. I checked my phone. Still no message from Caleb. Still no apology. Still no, I didn't know. But there was a voicemail from the law office. Miss Cross, just confirming the transfer is complete. The property is now fully in your name, uncontested. Congratulations. I didn't smile, but I did close my eyes for a moment and let the silence soak in. No chaos, no accusations, just finality. Oren looked over at me. You want to get lunch? Not yet, I said. I need to see something first. We drove past the house once more before leaving the neighborhood. The eviction notice flapped slightly in the breeze. Verena had closed the door, but not fully. The screen door remained open. A cardboard box sat on the porch now, maybe already packing. They'd had time to choose differently, to be decent, to admit fault. But they chose war. And war doesn't end with apologies. It ends with a reckoning. I didn't stop at a restaurant. I didn't post a victory message online. I drove back to Oren's, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down at the table. I opened my laptop, created a new document, titled it, New Deed, New Rules. Because the house wouldn't just be mine by law, it would become something else entirely, something that didn't lie, something that wouldn't erase people like me. They didn't just lose a house. They lost the right to rewrite my story, and now that the story is mine again, I know exactly what to do with it. The key turned cleanly. No resistance. No need to jiggle it or press my shoulder into the frame like I used to when the door stuck in winter. It opened like it knew I belonged there. I stepped inside. The house greeted me with a breath, lemon oil from fresh polish, and the faint scent of dust that settles in places untouched for months. I paused in the entryway, hand still on the doorknob. No voices, no footsteps, just quiet. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like I had to tiptoe through my own history. There were no shoes at the door, no Verena yoga mat curled by the stairs, no Zinnia vision board taped to the wall. The chaos had cleared, and in its place was something that felt blank, but not empty, ready. I left my keys on the counter and walked the perimeter slowly, one hand trailing along the walls, not just checking what was gone, but noticing what had stayed. The scratch on the hallway paneling from when I ran my bike inside at age 7, still there. The chip in the kitchen tile Mom never got around to fixing, still waiting. In the corner of the dining room, the old cabinet with the loose hinge creaked as I touched it. I didn't open it. I just nodded at it, like an old friend I hadn't seen in a while. Later that afternoon, after unpacking nothing, because I brought nothing, I sat in what used to be the living room and opened my laptop. The neighborhood was quiet, the sun soft through the front windows. That kind of light only late spring gives, forgiving and honest. Facebook opened without me asking. The first thing I saw was silence. Leland's profile hadn't posted anything in days. All his dramatic declarations, his prayers, his pleas for sympathy. Gone. Deleted. A neighbor had posted a video of the eviction. No caption. Just a simple line. Sometimes justice is quiet. It had over 300 reactions, dozens of comments, but none of them were from Leland's usual defenders. According to Oren, Leland and Verena had moved in with Verena's sister in Bakersfield. No forwarding address, no new posts, just gone. It wasn't the kind of justice you see in movies. No big speeches, no tearful apologies on the front lawn, just a disappearance, a quiet fade-out from a stage they once claimed as theirs. I closed the laptop. Later that night, I received a voice note from Lisa J. "I didn't know," she said. Her voice cracked a little. "I believed what I was told. I'm sorry." I didn't delete it. I didn't respond either. Some bridges don't need to be burned, but not all of them need to be crossed again. A few days passed. The house began to breathe again. The room that used to be mine, the one once claimed by Zinnia, turned into her creative space. I reclaimed it, but not for sleeping. I painted the walls a warm amber, the kind of color that catches candlelight and makes even silence feel safe. I hung a small wooden plaque on the door, "Elira Room, for women finding their way again." It wasn't a slogan, it was a promise. I partnered with a local nonprofit that helps women leaving emotionally abusive households, the kind of trauma that doesn't leave bruises, but builds cracks you trip over for years. I offered the room as short-term shelter, quiet, clean, private, because I knew what it was like to need space and not be given any. The first guest was scheduled to arrive in a week. In preparation, I restocked the bathroom with supplies, fresh towels, unscented soap, a journal with a pen clipped to the cover. Not because it fixes anything, but because being seen starts with the smallest gestures. I stood in the kitchen one night, stirring tea the way Mom used to, counterclockwise, with a spoon that never clinked too loud. "I still miss you, Mom," I whispered to no one. "But I'm not lost anymore." A few days later, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. It was from Leland. "I thought I was protecting what was left," he wrote. "I see now. I was destroying it." That was it. No plea for forgiveness, no apology, just acknowledgement. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. I tucked it behind the photo frame of Mom and me on the front porch, not to remember him, but to remember the truth finally spoken. That weekend, I planted herbs in the backyard, rosemary, thyme, basil, simple things. But they grew fast, like the house was ready to start over too. The porch light stayed on at night. One evening, just after sunset, someone knocked. I opened the door. A young woman stood there, holding a worn duffel, shoulders tense. "Hi," she said. I think I'm here for the Elira room?" I stepped back and held the door open. "Come in," I said. "You're safe here." She looked around, hesitant, took a breath, then smiled. "Did this place always feel like home?" she asked softly. I thought for a moment. "Not always," I replied. "But now it does." That night, after showing her the room, explaining the routine, and leaving her with her own quiet, I walked down the hallway, past the old family photos, some removed, some reframed, and turned off the lights one by one. The house felt warm, not from heat, from peace. It exhaled with me. The door they locked behind me now stays open for others. Sometimes, the loudest form of strength is quiet, not inaction, but intention. Rhiannon didn't scream. She didn't seek revenge with rage. She sought truth with quiet clarity, and that made all the difference. Have you ever been cut out of your own family's story, only to realize maybe it was the best thing that could have happened? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more true-to-life tales that dig deep into what family really means.